Okay, I'm going to start going through this practice quiz. When I look at this, I see number 1 has both variables squared, added with different coefficients. That tells me that this is an ellipse, just upon observing the equation. Because this has 2 foci, 2 vertices, I apologize. I think I would have to tell you that this is an ellipse, because it could have also been a hyperbola if I did not specify, right? Now, looking at number 3, both variables squared subtracted, I know from looking at it is a hyperbola. And if only one variable is squared, like number 4 and 5, those two are parabolas. So this is a parabola. Anyway, you can look at the equation to tell what it is shape-wise. You know I'm going to emphasize completing the square, so here we go on number 1. You cannot complete the square unless the leading coefficients are 1, but before you even get to that point, you have to rearrange it. Put the x's with the x squareds, put the y's with the y squareds, leave a space at the end of each of them, and I'm going to subtract the 36 over to make it negative 36 on the right side. Now, you have to have a leading coefficient of 1, so I get that by factoring out a 4. I know I could factor out a 4x, but I don't want to because I have to complete the square. So if I take a 9 out of these, I think it would be a y squared, and 9 times 4 is 36. Here we're going to go ahead and try to complete the square. So all I'm doing is rewriting it and leaving some blanks. To complete the square, you take half the middle. What's half of 6? 3. 3 squared goes up here as a 9. In reality, you added 4 times 9, or 36, so you'd have to add 36 to the other side. The other one, you're going to take half the middle here. Half of 4 is 2. 2 squared is 4. You really added 9 times 4, or 36, so you have to add another 36. That makes this equal 36. Now, how do I turn that 36 into a 1 by using division? Well, I think you might divide it by 36. Divide it by 36 and divide every term by 36. 4 goes into 36, I believe, 9 times. 9 goes into 36 on the second one. 9 goes into 36 4 times. Anything divided by itself is 1. I think I asked you to express it in standard form. There it is. Standard form again is x minus h quantity squared over a squared plus y minus k quantity squared over b squared. And as long as a is bigger than b, this will work, because you need that. Otherwise, your focal length, you're going to have a square root of a negative. But anyway, what makes this 0 for the x is 3. What makes this 0 is 2. So the center is going to be at 3, 2. So when I graph it, I'm going to go out to 3 and up to 2. Now, how far in the x direction do I go? What's under the x? A 9. The square root of 9 is 3. So if I go 3 to the right, that'll give me one vertex. 3 to the left will give me the other vertex. So I think that is 6, and that's a 2, right? And the middle we knew was what? Oh, I have it wrong. Where should the center be? Negative 3, 2. Come on, you're supposed to help me out on these things. So I'd have to emphasize a different quadrant. Let me do that again. Now let's do it. Negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, and up 2. So I think the center is at negative 3. Isn't that what makes this 0? Comma 2. Again, under the x is a 9. Square root of 9 is 3. So you go 3 in the x direction, 3 to the left, 3 to the right. So I think I'd have a couple of points here. How far in the y direction do I go? What's the square root of 4? 2. So I'd go 2 down and 2 up. So that would be negative 3 if I went 2 up from 2. And negative 3, 0, I think. And my actual ellipse is going to look like this. Now I need the focal length. C is equal to the square root of a squared minus b squared. So what does that mean? C is going to equal the square root of, what's a squared? 9 minus the b squared. So I get radical 5. This is a hard one. Can anybody move radical 5 to the right and give me the coordinates of this focus? What is the coordinates of that focus? You'd have the negative 3. You're moving in the x direction to the right, c, so you'd have to add the c, comma, and I think it's a 2, isn't it? What would your other focal point be? Your other focal point's labeled f prime. You'd have to move to the left of negative 3, so you'd subtract square root of 5, and it would be y value of 2. Anyway, I have my co-vertices labeled. I have my vertices labeled. I have my focus and my center labeled. And that's all I could ask on this, other than perhaps you might give me eccentricity. That's c over a. So c is radical 5. A squared is 9, so a is 3. So that would be the eccentricity. I tend to leave it open-ended. I ask you to express equation in standard form, sketch, label everything you can. So some people will give me more information than others. Anyway, there's number 1, a little long, not too bad. Number 2, I would have to tell you again that this has some shape. Otherwise, it would be a little bit vague. So let me sketch these first. Anytime I'm given information, I tend to sketch it. So I'm going to try to sketch this. 0, 3 is right here. 0, negative 3 is down here. Those are the foci. 0, 6 and 0, negative 6 are my vertices. So that means that this ellipse has to be centered at the origin, I believe, and has to look something like this. Now, I'm going to write it out. It's going to be x minus h quantity squared over a squared plus y minus k quantity squared over b squared. Since the center is at the origin, h and k, which is the coordinates of the center, should be 0 and 0. So the center here is 0, 0, that's hk, so I put in 0, 0. In the x direction, in the y direction, I think I want a distance of 6. So under the y, I put the 6, and remember it's that squared. So far I have x squared over something plus y squared over 36 equaling 1, and I almost have my equation. Now, how can I find b squared? Because technically this is b squared and this is the a squared over here because it's a longer axis. So c is the square root of a squared minus b squared. So I'm trying to find, I think, b squared, right? Anyway, what is a's length here? It would be 6, right? And What is C length? C goes from the center to the focus. So I think C is going to be 3. If I square both sides, I think I'd have the square root would go away. You'd have 36 minus b squared. If I move the b squared over and subtract, I think that makes b squared into a 27. Anyway, there's the equation for number 2. Okay, as we move on to question 3, I notice that both variables are squared. They are subtracted, which tells me it's probably going to be a hyperbola. Okay, so I'm going to rearrange it. X squared, I'll put the x's with the x squared. Leave a space. There's a minus, and I'll put the y, negative 2y with the y squared. And I'll add the 1 to the other side. To complete the square, you have to have a leading coefficient of 1. You can only do that with the y by factoring out a negative 1. So if you distributed this negative, you'd still have the same thing as above. It's just that now my leading coefficient is a 1, and that allows me to complete the square. Oops. So I'm going to say minus 1 times y plus quantity squared. Okay, let's see what we can do. I don't know why I have it equaling 0 on the right. Shouldn't it equal 1? Okay. Now we're going to complete the square. Half of 2, 1. 1 squared is 1. If you add 1 to one side, you have to add 1 to the other side. Over here, you're going to take half of 2, which is 1. 1 squared is 1. In reality, you added a negative 1, so you're going to have to add a negative 1. I think it makes it equal this. At which point, I think I would get this over 1 minus y plus 1 squared. Y plus 1 squared, and that would also be over 1, equaling 1. Again, I'm just putting it into the standard form. What was the standard form? Well, there's a couple of them, but one of them was x minus h quantity squared over a squared minus y minus k squared over b squared equals 1. If the x is first and is positive like this one is, that means it opens like the x-axis, left and right. So anyway, where is the center of this thing? What makes this 0 and what makes this 0? 1 comma negative 1. So I'll go to 1 comma negative 1. 1, let me make it smaller just to make it match. 1 negative 1 is about there. Let me mark off how far in the x direction do I go. How far in the y direction? Well, what's under the x? A 1. Square root of 1 is 1. So I go 1 in the x direction, 1 in the x direction. Also, 1 in the y direction, 1 in the y direction. You make a rectangle because it's not an ellipse, it's a hyperbola. And you make the diagonals of that rectangle. Now, because the x is first and positive, it opens around the x-axis. So here's what the graph looks like on the left, and here's what it would look like on the right. Now, what are my vertices? Would that be a vertices at 0, negative 1? And that vertex would be at 2, negative 1, I think, right? If I moved right to the right 1 from 1, negative 1, 1, negative 1 is where that point is. 1 to the right of 1 would be 2. 1 to the left of 1 would be 0. The focal length is a squared plus b squared. It's always the opposite of the sign in the middle. So it's going to be square root of 1 plus 1 or square root of 2. Again, this hard part for most people is going to be finding these focal points. Since it's moving horizontally, the x value changes. So you have 1 plus the c, and over here you'd have 1 minus whatever c is. And those would be your two focal points. Plural of focus is simply foci. Okay, in the interest of time, I might move on to number 4. 4 is a pretty easy one compared to the other ones. Y could simply be called y minus 0. If I factor a 4 out, I get x minus 2. And now I have it in standard form. That's pretty much all there is, because you have y minus k, quantity squared, equals 4p times x minus h. I did ask you to graph it, so I'd like to know what makes the x part 0, what makes the y part 0, because that's according to the vertices. So I think my vertices are going to be at 2, 0. Is that right? Or my vertex? 2, 0. Which way does this open? This happens to be a x equals y squared type, doesn't it? X equals y squared, which means this parabola is going to be opening to the left. I know it's a parabola because in the original equation only one variable is squared. If you look right here, what does 4p have to equal? 4p has to equal 4. What does that make p? Or the absolute value of p, because it's a length. It's 1. So I go 1 to the inside. That makes my focus. The focus now would be at that point, because my vertex is at, it'd be at 3, wouldn't it? Yeah. So this would be 2, 0, and I think the focus would be at 3, 0. If I want p units to the left, where's the directrix? The directrix is x equals 1. Please give me an equation. If you just tell me 1, I don't know if you mean x or y. So try to make it an equation for the directrix. On to number 5, the last question here. Only one variable squared, which tells me very clearly that this is a parabola. So I may just rearrange it, x squared minus 4x, and I might just add the 2y to the other side. I'm going to again attempt to complete the square. So half of 4 here is 2. 2 squared is 4. If you add 4 to one side, you have to add 4 to the other side. So can I now take a 2 or even a negative 2 out of that? No, I just want to take a 2. If I take a 2 out, I'd make it y plus 2. And that would be in standard form. Looking at this, I see this as a y equaling an x squared type. There's more to it, but there's a y equaling an x squared. Anyway, y equals x squared opens which direction? Up. I just need to know where the vertex is. So the vertex is what makes this 0, 2, comma, what makes that 0, which is negative 2. So it's going to, vertex would be at 2, negative 2. And which way did it open? Up. So I make my parabola open up. I label my vertex as 2, negative 2. Maybe you know your formula, I'm not sure. The formula would be x minus h quantity squared equals 4p times y minus k. We have the h and the k. That's a 2 and a negative 2. Now, can you look at this and tell me what p should equal? I think I have 4p equaling 2. Divide by 4, you get p to equal 2/4 or 1/2. So if I go up 1/2, where would my focus be? Would the x value still be 2? And the y value, if you go up 1/2 from negative 2, would be negative 1 1/2. If you want a half on the outside, you'd get the directrix. And what is the equation of the directrix? It'd be a y equals, because it's horizontal. And what would it be? Y equals, is it negative 2 1/2? Now somebody mentioned, guys, if you're having trouble if it's x equals or y equals, listen to me please. If the parabola opens up or down, is it y equals for directrix? If it opens left or right, the directrix would be x equals a constant. Anyway, good luck with the quiz. I hope the practice quiz helped.